COSATU says it cannot be expected to grow its membership in a landscape where unemployment is extremely high. The country's largest trade union federation celebrated its 40th anniversary in Dobsonville, Soweto today. Officials have acknowledged that the federation's influence is waning.
It's counterintuitive to say that when we had membership of 2.2 million, at the time our economy was growing at about 5%. Per year. And now we're sitting at a point where the economy hasn't grown beyond 1% since 2008. And unemployment is sitting at 42.4%. It is quite high, and we all know that. And so by virtue of being a union member, it means you have a job and you're paying the subscription that needs to be paid. So when we're sitting where 4 out of 10 people are unemployed, we can't expect for the membership to still remain where it was and also when the economy was growing.
Now, political analyst Professor Situlego Matebesi joins us for more on the trade unions. Prof, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I guess a good place to start, we just heard that bite with COSATU saying we can't expect them to have the same kind of membership that they did in yesteryear when we have the kind of unemployment that we do. What do you make of this waning support?
Hi, good evening, Mahlatsi, and good evening to South Africans. Yes, a very good question to start off with, because another layer, it's you can't expect to have the same modus operandi that you had 10, 20 years ago. You've got a younger population that is entering the job market, even if we have a huge unemployment rate. So definitely something needs to shift. And it seems as if unions and even trade unions, who are the umbrella bodies in terms of these different labor organizations in South Africa, still have to learn that they also need to improvise. They need to try and improve on certain aspects. But it seems as if for them it's still business as usual.
Could one in any way equate this waning support to their partner, their alliance in the tripartite alliance, the ANC as well? We've seen that dwindling support. We saw the results at the 2024 general elections. Is this what to be expected of these alliance partners, that when the one does well, the other will, and then when the other doesn't, then the other will follow suit?
Not necessarily, but we've got a huge problem where if you see what is going on in the South African landscape, where our trade unions are not necessarily doing what they're supposed to do. And I strongly believe that even if the African National Congress, who I strongly believe is perhaps the dominant partner of this tripartite alliance, is not doing well, but if trade unions themselves were advancing the interest of South African workers, we would have spoken a different, story. But because we have seen how it seems as if our trade unions and trade union leaders has become entangled in some of the difficulties and the huge challenges that we are facing in South Africa, where at one moment they will be talking publicly that they are advancing the interest of workers, and then the next moment they are actually sitting with political leaders discussing the future of leaders and being offered what I will say perverse incentive to try and perhaps even mute some of the rights that they are demanding.
So would you say that some of these downfalls are pretty much own goals?
No, it's pretty much own goals that have been created by our political landscape. Remember, you can't have political or worker organizations that does not speak to or even get involved in politics. But we've got a very unique situation in South Africa where, and this is my personal stance, and I strongly still hold that stance to say, By now, I strongly believe that an organization such as COSATU should have divorced itself from being so closely aligned to a political party or political parties. They could have encouraged their members to vote for whoever they want to, or even support the African National Congress, but not have this formal, relationship, which I strongly believe that is to the disadvantage of South African workers. And that's why today you've got a situation where some trade union leaders will look after their own interests, and knowing that by holding a certain viewpoint, by being supportive of certain political leaders, that will advance their own careers within the tripartite alliance and even getting government posts and all that. And that has been to the disadvantage. You can go to South Africa. And I'm going to make a typical example, and it's actually, for me personally, a very, just indicative of how far we've come to protect our workers. Go to every single mall in South Africa where workers do not have access to canteens. It's actually shocking to see people sitting outside during rains and all that, where they don't have any, place to go and have lunch. And this is what is happening in South Africa, throughout South Africa. And you ask yourself, but where are these trade unions that should be able to protect and advance the rights of workers?
And that's a good tangible example to look at as well. And as you're mentioning, your personal view that they perhaps should have had this divorce a while ago and disassociated themselves, not completely, but in some way whatsoever when it comes to the tripartite alliance. They say, as a tripartite alliance, we heard them as well today saying they are united, saying that they are going to be united behind the local government elections as well. But, I mean, are they really united? We've seen those cracks. We know how the SACP and also how COSATU feels about the ANC getting into bed with the DA, forming the GNU. And we also know that the SACP has expressed interest in contesting next year's local government elections. So what kind of a united front will this be when 2/3 of this tripartite alliance will be essentially competing?
Well, at the height of the dominance of the African National Congress, and I think what have been very commendable post our democratic dispensation is just to go and look at the role that these tripartite alliances have played, partners have played in terms of advancing and projecting the African National Congress as the party to vote for. I mean, you've got a labor organization, trade union federation with many numbers, large numbers of large support in South Africa. And then you also have another political party, the South African Communist Party, at its height. That was where I think the strength of the ANC lied. But over the years, the ANC in itself, if you look at its internal dynamics, had a huge dent in terms of its own support. And now you've got a South African Communist Party which have publicly, and even although already we've seen the cracks as a result of this decision that have been taken, by the way, I will say in a democratic way within the SACP, but that also have led to some cracks because it seems as if certain leaders within the SACP has different opinions as to how the SACP should have having that. So, and you've got an opposition which I strongly believe that yes, also very fragmented, but which have gathered some strength. You've got an MK party which didn't have any structures, and we saw the election support that they got. And the question is, what is going to happen next year? You don't want a bleeding ANC without having its alliance partners advancing its own interest and supporting it. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this will all play out.
And speaking of that as well, it's also going to be probably at the top of the agenda or on the agenda somehow at the upcoming NGC. Prof, how important is this particular NGC coming up? Looking at it in the context of the ad hoc committee, the Madlanga Commission, Witness D being gunned down last night.
Yeah, it's shocking. And it's very commendable, I must say. But I'm going to say what I wanted to say before. What is very commendable, and I think for me, it would have been the greatest tragedy of our democracy if the president hasn't come out and taken a stance on this. Because for me, what happened yesterday was an attack not on, and may soul rest in peace, on the witness, but it was an attack on the state. It is an attack on democracy, where everyone can see that there are some individuals in South Africa who are hell bent on destroying this country. And unfortunately, that a very unfortunate stance that they've taken, a means is to take the lives of individuals. And the state needs to come out guns blazing and take a stance and say, not in our name. And I will not be surprised if the African National Congress comes out strongly and send a message to South Africans that they will not tolerate this. And yet again, I want to labor a point. May the witness so rest in peace, and I hope his family can find comfort.
Absolutely. Prof, thank you so much for your time. And of course, we did hear President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier at the 40th anniversary of COSATU also condemning this and saying that heads must roll.